Welcome, everyone, to the 32nd National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. As most of you will know, the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women was declared in honor of the 14 young women who in 1989 were purposefully selected and murdered in the Polytechnique simply because they were women, today what we call femicide. Most of those women were students in engineering programs, at the time a non-traditional career choice. December 6 marks the 32nd anniversary of their murders. That single horrific incident drew national and international attention to a phenomenon that had until then been unrecognized on a larger social and political level. Despite the lobbying work of women activists and their allies, the message that needed to be understood and responded to is that when women are murdered, they are often murdered simply because they are women and frequently by the men they have a relationship with. Most commonly, current or former husbands, boyfriends, or lovers, as well as their sons, grandsons, and nephews. Tracking the true number of women and children who've been killed by intimate partners or family members in Ontario is not an easy job, as the province doesn't centralize this data collection. OAIS, the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses, and university partnerships have done their best to gather information community by community. OAIS Count has registered 855 women and children as having been killed between the years of 1990 and 2020. While general homicide rates by family members have been gradually dropping over the last 30 years, according to Stats Canada, violence against women by their intimate partners and related homicides continue to happen.
My name is Yvonne Spunio and I'm part of the Women's Resources team. This year, we've decided to focus on missing and exploited children and youth. According to the Missing Children's Database, more than 50,000 children and youth are abducted in Canada each year. Between 2014 and 2019, Cybertip.ca, an online reporting database for child exploitation in Canada, has processed over 1.7 million exploitation reports. There's been an 88% increase in sextortion, which is the practice of extorting money or sexual favors from someone by threatening to reveal evidence of their sexual activity and other online exploitation since the pandemic began. Nearly 1 in 4 parents have come across inappropriate online behavior aimed at their child, and 1 in 10 children are sexually victimized before they turn 18. 39% of luring attempts reported to Cybertip.ca in the last 2 years have involved children 13 or under. 1 in 3 attempts reported happened on Instagram, Snapchat, and Kik Messenger. An article released by the Government of Ontario titled Ontario Protecting Children at Risk of Sex Trafficking in July 2021 reported that women and girls are increasingly at risk of not only domestic violence, but of being exploited by their partners, family members, and those both known and unknown to them. Indigenous women and girls are underrepresented in this demographic and make up about 50% of exploited and trafficked women. Young women and girls are particularly vulnerable to being targeted, especially those from Indigenous, Black, and other racialized communities, as well as children and youth in care. Although boys, men, and people who are from the 2S LGBTQIA community are also at risk. Ontario is a hub for human trafficking, with most of the cases being human sex trafficking. The majority of police-reported incidents in Canada are within the province of Ontario. In 2019, 65% of known HT victims were under the age of 25. According to Cybertip.ca, children are at an increased risk because of more freedoms online, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic when the world moved to online learning. Children and youth had excessive unmonitored time online and were unable to participate in activities and socialization that they would normally do as safeguards. During 2020, the tip line issued an alert due to analyst discovery that child sex offenders saw this as an unprecedented time to mobilize and share strategies for targeting and abusing children, and this has continued. There's no amount of online filters or safety controls that can replace parental supervision and communication. Tips to keep our children safe from being at risk of exploitation are keeping open communication by having regular conversations, setting the expectation that you will monitor your child's online communications, making sure that all of your online activities, including social media, are private. Tell your child that if they're uncomfortable with an interaction, either online or in person, that they can come to you to discuss without repercussions. Engaging in as many activities as a family or individuals, including sports and leisure, are also helpful. If you notice that your child is struggling, there are mental health resources available to you for both short and long-term counseling and support. So now that we are coming out of COVID, there should be more access to supports, both formal and informal. So now we'll have Kelly McCullough speak more in depth about violence and exploitation against children and youth.
Hello everyone, my name is Kelly McCullough. I am a Violence Against Women's worker for the Kawartha Haliburton Children's Aid Society. I have been fortunate to be invited here today to speak to the topic of violence and exploitation of children within our communities. When we think of violence and exploitation of children, we often think of horrific and devastating abuse against children. As the voices of women are silenced in society, the voices of children are non-existent. We often hear adult survivors of child violence speaking out about their experiences as children. They are not heard. Infants face another level of vulnerability as they are unsafe to speak out or unable to physically get away. How do we keep these children safe? I ask myself this question every day. My safety plans for children in abusive situations is to increase their visibility in their communities so that they are seen, heard, listened to, and they are in safe places so they can go and have safe people to be around. As schools reopen to face-to-face learning, counseling available face-to-face, and recreational activities open, the Society received more reports of child violence and exploitation. Throughout COVID-19 pandemic, children were isolated to their homes, with caregivers who were violent towards them or exploiting them for their own gains. Many children are ignored or invisible due to societal marginalization and oppression within their communities. For example, there is an overrepresentation of Indigenous children within the child welfare system. As I ask questions about heritage and cultural background of the youth that I work with, the more and more I found that 1 in 3 of the youth I worked with identified as Indigenous. These youth have been raped, physically assaulted, emotionally terrorized, and have little to no connection with their communities. Many of these children are being cared for by parents who have also endured child abuse and/or exploitation and didn't receive support or safety as a child. We see a lack of media coverage pertaining to child violence and exploitation in order to protect the confidentiality of the victim. However, with the lack of media coverage, we see that children's voices are being silenced, and as a result, there is a decrease of public's awareness of the ongoing prevalence of violence against children. I see and hear numerous acts of child abuse and exploitation on a daily basis. These children are living in environments involving poverty, addictions, mental health, violence, and do not have a safe person to go to or place to turn to. These children are often being diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or oppositional defiant disorder within the school system. However, it is trauma treatment they require in a safe environment. These children are often unable to articulate their abuse and feelings, so therefore they often articulate it within their behaviors of aggression, violence, and/or silence. Then I have witnessed these children being labeled as difficult to manage. Abusive caregivers then often take the opportunity to deflect their own abusive behaviors onto their children's behaviors. Then those same children become further vulnerable to outside perpetrators who are involved in drugs and human trafficking. These perpetrators will feed off of the child's need or youth's need for love, attention, or understanding in order to further abuse them and exploit them. Children are our future. I have always worked from the philosophy of it takes a village to raise a child. In a society where we often function in individual silos, we forget that we're all here to help one another. I was invited to speak here today as a child welfare worker. However, I think it's important that I share that I'm a survivor of child abuse and exploitation. I share this as I think we need to have hope for these vulnerable children and their future. I had the opportunity to have teachers who listened and provided care and a safe place. I also had grandparents who took on the responsibility to care for me from the age of 8 to 22 years old. Statistics of child abuse, exploitation, and child development would say that I was doomed because of my childhood experience. However, I was able to have a safety, support, and care of so many individuals over my life, and my voice was heard. I had a teacher who would keep me after school to look after the classroom pet and provide me with food, knowing that when I would go home, I was not safe. I would not share with her the violence and exploitation I was experiencing in the care of my mother. Then one day she told me if I go home and no one is there to come back to school. After that day, I remained in my grandparents' care. Her act of kindness saved my life. I tell this story as it is crucial that children have safe environments and safe people in their community, and they can speak about their safety and well-being. I had the opportunity to break the generational cycle of abuse, and I did. A step forward to giving each child in need a voice and a choice in their own lives and encouraging them to connect with the community and community services. We have amazing community services such as Women's Resources, Forecast, Chimo Youth and Family Services, John Howard Society, Lindsay Boys and Girls Club, and much more that have been creating and have created safe spaces for our children and youth and safe people. I am so grateful to be working in this community and with this community team and continue to provide services and care to children and youth. If you suspect any child who is being abused or exploited, please contact the Kawartha Haliburton Children's Aid Society. Also, you can go to our website for further information on duty to report and next steps. Thank you very much.
"14 dead, 14 people injured, 20 minutes. On December 6, 1989, these 14 women lost their lives. Their dreams came to an end. We remember Anne-Marie Lemay. She was in fourth year mechanical engineering. Anne-Marie Edouard. She loved outdoor sports like skiing, diving, and riding, and was always surrounded by friends. She was studying chemical engineering. Annie Saint-Arnaud. She was a mechanical engineering student from Latu, Quebec, a Laurentian pulp and paper town in the upper Saint-Maurice River Valley. She lived in a small apartment in Montreal. Her friends considered her a fine student. She was killed as she sat listening to a presentation in her last class before graduation. She had a job interview with Alcan Aluminum scheduled for the following day. She had talked about eventually getting married to the man who had been her boyfriend since she was a teenager. Annie Turcotte. She was in her first year of engineering and lived with her brother in a small apartment near the university. She was described as gentle and athletic. She was a diver and a swimmer. She went into metallurgical engineering so she could one day help improve the environment. Barbara Dagnon. She was to graduate at the end of the year. She was a teaching assistant for her father, Pierre Dagnon, a mechanical engineering professor with the city's other French language engineering school, the Université du Québec à Montréal. Barbara Kluknik-Wida Juiza. She was a first-year nursing student. She arrived from Poland with her husband in 1987. Geneviève Bergeron. She was a second-year scholarship student in mechanical engineering. She played the clarinet and sang in a professional choir. In her spare time, she played basketball and swam. Hélène Colgan. She was in her final year of mechanical engineering. She had plans to go on to get a master's degree. She had 3 job offers and was leaning toward accepting one from a Toronto area. Marisa Lagagnère. She was the only non-student killed. She worked in the budget department of the engineering school. She had recently been married. Marisa Leclerc. She was in fourth year metallurgy. She had just a year to go before graduation. She was one of the top students in the school. She acted in plays in junior college. She was the first victim whose name was known. She was found by her father, Montreal Police Lieutenant Pierre Leclerc. He was to say later that he was so shocked that in the moment, he didn't pay attention to the fact that all the victims were women. Maude Aviernik. She was a second-year student in metallurgical engineering, and she also had a degree in environmental design from the Université de Québec à Montréal. Michelle Richard. She was in second-year metallurgical engineering and was presenting a paper with Aviernik when she was killed. Nathalie Crotu. She was another graduating mechanical engineer. She had planned to take a 2-week vacation in Cancun with Kogan at the end of the month. Sonia Pelletier. She was the head of her class and the pride of Saint-Ulrich, Quebec, her remote birthplace in the Gaspé Peninsula. She had 5 sisters and 2 brothers. She was killed the day she was to graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering. She had a job interview lined up for the following day. To quote a survivor, Nathalie Provost, "For me, these women aren't just names. There can be no quiet mourning for the dead while we fight to prevent violence against women takes on increasing urgency. We still have a lot of work to do to ensure that women can live without injustice, without misogyny, without fear." 14 dead, 14 injured, 20 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alexis. I am a part of the Women's Resources team. We are now going to take a moment to remember the women and girls we have lost to femicide in Ontario this year. As you see these women's faces and read their names, please remember that these women were daughters, mothers, friends, and valued members of our communities whose lives were stolen too soon. We would also like to take a moment to thank the Cambridge United Church Voices of Victory Youth Choir for performing their rendition of More Love along with our memorial.